of psoriatic arthritis, patients with peripheral arthritis, and an inadequate response to at least one conventional and at least one biological DMARD, or when a biological DMARD is not appropriate, that is when there is non-adherence to injections or a strong patient preference for an oral drug, a JAK inhibitor may be considered. So this is the treatment algorithm published in EULAR 2019 update. According to this, in phase 3 and phase 4, JAK inhibitors play a role. So the only JAK inhibitor approved for psoriatic arthritis so far is tofacitinib, which has shown to be effective in various clinical domains of the disease, like arthritis, enthesitis, dactylitis, and the skin disease. And it also have shown to be effective in TNF inhibitor insufficient responder populations as well. But there were some safety concerns, like dose-dependent increase in the risk of opportunistic infection and venous thromboembolic risk identified in the trials. And the following are the main 3 randomized control trials done on tofacitinib. I would not go into detail of each of those due to time constraints. And so despite the availability of various therapies, including one approved targeted synthetic DMARD, many patients still do not respond adequately to treatment or gradually lose the response to treatment over time. So in this situation, upadacitinib comes to play. It's a novel selective JAK1 inhibitor. It has the ability to decrease joint inflammation and damage mediated by JAK1 signaling while having minimum inhibitory effects on JAK2 and JAK3. So this could potentially minimize some of the reported safety concerns with non-selective JAK inhibition, which are thought to be mediated by JAK2 and 3 signaling pathways. So upadacitinib was approved for the use in moderate to severe rheumatoid arthritis by FDA in August 2019, following several phase 3 randomized control trials. Some of them are completed and some of them are still going on. I have stated the examples of the trials. And so what is the place for upadacitinib in psoriatic arthritis? To answer this question, Select PSA-1 trial was designed. It's a phase 3 multicenter double-blinded randomized control trial. And subjects with moderate to severe active psoriatic arthritis who had an inadequate response to or intolerance to one or more non-biological DMARD were included. The trial was designed to assess the effect of the study drug in various clinical domains of the disease, and also to assess the side effect profile in comparison to a placebo as well as to adalimumab. And trial included 2 periods with separate objectives. The objectives in period 1 were to compare the efficacy of the 2 doses of upadacitinib versus a placebo and versus adalimumab for the treatment of signs and symptoms of the disease and for the prevention of structural progression, and to compare the safety and tolerability. So period 2 was to evaluate the long-term safety and tolerability and the efficacy of the 2 doses of upadacitinib in the study subjects who have completed period 1. So talking about the basis of the dose selection of the trial, the 15 milligram and the 13 milligram doses of upadacitinib were selected for the trial as they have shown to be effective with an acceptable side effect profile in phase 3 trials of rheumatoid arthritis. And the reason behind the selection were the effect of upadacitinib on tender and swollen joint counts and the markers of inflammation and ACR responses are expected to be similar in RA and psoriatic arthritis, both conditions. And the proof of this concept had been demonstrated in trials of tofacitinib at doses that are efficacious in rheumatoid arthritis. So I think we have answered the first question. Did the trial address a clearly focused issue? So my answer would be yes. And for the next 5 questions, I think they all can be summarized and put into one single question. Was the methodology of this trial correct and sound? So going into the methodology, it's a phase 3 randomized double-blinded parallel group active and placebo-controlled multi-center study with 2 periods. And trial was conducted at 281 sites in 45 countries from April 2017. And the last patient completed week 24 in December 2019, and I'm going to analyze the results of this first 24 weeks of the study today, and the extension period is still going on. So the period 1 of the study comprises of 56 weeks, and out of the 56 weeks, first 24 weeks are placebo and active comparator control, whereas the next 32 weeks are only active comparator control. And the period 2 is the long-term extension, which is supposed to be extending up to about 3 years duration, and which is currently going on. So I have only included the main inclusion and exclusion criteria here, but there were several other inclusion exclusion criteria as well. So the main one inclusion criteria were study subjects should be more than 18 years, and there should be a clinical diagnosis of psoriatic arthritis according to CASP criteria, with onset of symptoms for at least 6 months prior to the screening visit, and there should be active disease with more than 3 tender and swollen joint counts, and there should be either more than 1 erosion on X-ray or elevated levels of high sensitivity CRP, and there should be a diagnosis of active plaque psoriasis or a past history of active plaque psoriasis should be there, and patients should have shown inadequate response to at least one non-biological DMARD at maximum tolerated doses, and this inclusion criterion 7 states the permitted non-biological demands that the patients can be on while participating in the trial. They have specified the types, the maximum doses, and the combinations which can be allowed. Up to 2 drugs, a combination of 2 drugs is allowed, but the MTX and leflunomide combination was not allowed. And the main exclusion criteria were there shouldn't be a prior history of exposure to JAK inhibitors, and they should not be on more than 2 non-biological DMARDs, and there should not be a history of fibromyalgia, any juvenile arthritis, or a current diagnosis of any other inflammatory joint disease other than psoriatic arthritis. And apart from these 3 main criteria, patients with major organ failures, infection, and pregnancy were also excluded. So, was the participants adequately randomized? So to answer and all the subjects meeting the necessary eligibility criteria were centrally randomized using an IRT, that is Interactive Response Technology System. So before the study was initiated, IRT directions were provided to each study site, and at the screening visit, subjects were assigned a unique subject number by the IRT, and this number was used throughout the study. And the randomization number assigned by the IRT encoded the subject's treatment group assignment according to the randomization schedule generated by the investigator. This IRT also provided appropriate study drug kit numbers to dispense to each subject. And the subjects who meet the predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria were centrally randomized in a 2:2:2:1:1 ratio to one of the 5 treatment groups I have stated below. And and this is the proposed study design published in the study protocol. So were all the patients who entered the trial properly accounted for at its conclusion? So efficacy analysis was conducted in the modified intention to treat population, which included all the patients who had undergone randomization and had received at least 1 dose of upadacitinib, placebo, or adalimumab. So were the study personnel adequately blind to treatment? So AbbVie was the sponsor who designed this study. So all the AbbVie personnel with direct oversight of the conduct and the management of the trial, and the investigators, the study site personnel, and the subjects were blinded to each subject's treatment throughout the study. And in order to maintain the blind, identical upadacitinib and placebo tablets and identical adalimumab and matching placebo syringes were provided for the study. And in a situation that requires unblinding of the study drug, the investigator requested to contact the AbbVie therapeutic area medical director prior to breaking the blind. But if an urgent therapeutic intervention was necessary, which warrants breaking the blind prior to contacting the AbbVie, the investigator can directly access the IRT system to break the blind. But in such circumstances, it should have been notified within 24 hours to the AbbVie. So, were all the groups similar at the start of the trial? The demographic and clinical characteristics of the patients at baseline in each study group were similar. So you can see it in this chart. All the study groups were more or less similar. And aside from the experimental intervention, were the groups treated equally? Well, answer to that question is also yes, because in period 1, during the first 34 weeks, all the study subjects in every group were allowed to be on permitted background treatment with stable doses of conventional synthetic DMARD, the permitted ones, or they were allowed to continue their stable doses of NSAIDs, paracetamol, low potency opiates, oral steroid low doses, etc., with no change in the dose or frequency. Then after week 36, all the study subjects were allowed to receive, if necessary, one intra-articular or a local corticosteroid injection every 12 weeks, or they were allowed to change or adjust the doses of baseline corticosteroids, NSAIDs, paracetamol, and other drugs they were on, permitted drugs, or add or change to a permitted conventional synthetic DMARD during this phase. And in both period 1 and 2, the following topical treatment were allowed for all the study subjects, including the shampoos that does not contain steroids, the bland emollients, and low potency topical corticosteroids on pre-specified areas of the skin. So aside from the experiment, and talking about rescue treatment, and this rescue treatment, all the study subjects were eligible to rescue treatment if they do not achieve at least 20% improvement in either tender joint count or swollen joint count by 16 weeks. And so they were allowed to receive either NSAIDs, paracetamol, low potency opioids, oral steroids, or intra-articular or local corticosteroid injection, or a permitted non-biological DMARD. Also, they were allowed to receive as rescue treatment at week 16. So I think we have answered all the 5 questions here. And so we can conclude that the results of the trial are valid. So the next question would be, what are the results? So there are 2 broad questions in this part B also. How large was the treatment effect and how precise was the treatment effect? So when answering the first question, so you have to answer 3 other sub-questions. What outcomes were measured? Is the primary outcome clearly specified? And what results were found in each outcome? So this is the primary efficacy endpoint of the study, the proportion of subjects achieving ACR20 response at week 12. So ACR20 response was defined as at least 20% decrease from baseline in tender and swollen joint count, with improvement of at least 20% in at least 3 out of following 5, that is assessment of disease activity on a numerical rating scale by patient as well as by physician, and then assessment of disability level based on a patient questionnaire, and the patient's assessment of pain on a numerical rating scale, and high sensitivity CRP levels. So there is a huge list of secondary efficacy endpoints as well. So I would not go into detail of each of those. So they comprise of resolution of enthesitis, dactylitis, improvement of skin disease, improvement of pain scores, and improvement of radiological progression, and also health-related quality of life. So there were additional key secondary efficacy endpoints. There were two additional key secondary efficacy endpoints, that is the ACR 50 and 70 responses at week 12 and ACR 20 response at week 2. So going into the results, this is the graph of achievement of primary efficacy endpoint by each study group. You all can see that upadacitinib doses, 2 doses are on the top. So achieving primary efficacy endpoint, the upadacitinib 30 milligram had the highest percentage, followed by upadacitinib 15 and then adalimumab, and lastly placebo. So the between group analysis of each drug showed that there is a significance with a p-value of less than 0.001 for the 2 doses of upadacitinib versus placebo and upadacitinib 30 milligram versus adalimumab. But upadacitinib 15 milligram versus adalimumab, there was a the hierarchical analysis failed at that point, and there was no so therefore no p-value was offered for that analysis, and it was not significant. So on the basis of Kocher's 3-group non-inferiority analysis method, comparing adalimumab versus upadacitinib 30 and adalimumab versus upadacitinib 15 milligram effect preservation, the findings suggested the non-inferiority of both doses of upadacitinib to adalimumab, because the lower boundary of the 95% confidence interval was above the pre-specified threshold of 50%. And the upadacitinib 30 milligram was superior to adalimumab in achieving the primary efficacy endpoint, but 15 milligram dose was not superior. So because of that, it prevented the testing of significance for secondary endpoints lower down in the endpoint hierarchy. So in summary, for the achievement of primary efficacy endpoint, both doses of upadacitinib were non-inferior to adalimumab, but then 30 milligram dose was superior to adalimumab with respect to achievement of primary efficacy endpoint. So going into the achievement of secondary efficacy endpoint, both doses of upadacitinib were better than placebo for achieving most of the secondary efficacy endpoints. I would not go into detail. This chart summarizes the results. And some of the secondary efficacy endpoints could not be analyzed owing to the failure of hierarchy at the point of ACR 20 response with upadacitinib 15 milligram as compared to adalimumab, as I stated before also. So I have given some examples of secondary efficacy endpoints which could not be analyzed. And in summary, for the achievement of secondary efficacy endpoints, the results were better with both upadacitinib doses than with placebo in most aspects of psoriatic arthritis, including objective measures of psoriatic activity, achievement of minimal disease activity, resolution of enthesitis, physical function, fatigue, quality of life, and inhibition of radiological progression. But there are limited data on which to base the assumption for comparison of upadacitinib with adalimumab with regard to secondary efficacy endpoints. So these ACR 50 and 70 responses, the additional key secondary endpoints, the comparison of the 2 doses of upadacitinib with placebo and upadacitinib 30 milligram with adalimumab with respect to ACR 50 and 70 responses were also in the same direction as for primary efficacy endpoint, but no significant differences noted in comparison of the 15 milligram dose of upadacitinib with adalimumab for the ACR 50 and 70 responses at week 12. So these are the graphs for ACR 50 response achievement and ACR 70 response achievement. So going into the safety results, the incidence of adverse effects including serious infection was similar with upadacitinib 15 milligram and adalimumab, but were more frequent with upadacitinib 30 milligram. And most common adverse effect was upper respiratory tract infection. And I have put here the incidence of serious infection. You all can see it's high with upadacitinib 30. And going into the opportunistic infection, upadacitinib 30 had one case of pneumocystis jirovecii and one case of CMV pneumonia with 5 herpes zoster cases. And malignancies wise, Upadacitinib 30 had 2 non-melanoma skin cancers and 1 other type of cancer. But placebo also had 1 case of non-melanoma skin cancer. So the significance is questionable. And no lymphomas were reported in any of the study groups. And no major cardiovascular events reported with upadacitinib. There was 1 case of pulmonary embolism reported with upadacitinib 30 milligram dose. And DVT, upadacitinib did not have any cases of DVT, but there was 1 case with placebo and 2 cases with adalimumab instead. And grade 3 elevation of AST ALT were seen both with upadacitinib 30 milligram and adalimumab, but no one met the High-Low criteria for DILI, the drug-induced liver injury, and no significant hematological parameter changes had been occurred in any of the trial groups. And there was grade 3 and 4 CPK elevation commonly seen with upadacitinib group rather than adalimumab or placebo groups. And there was elevation of LDL and HDL more commonly in the upadacitinib group than the other groups, but there was no significant change of LDL to HDL or cholesterol to HDL ratios. So this is the summary of safety results. And so when summarizing the findings of safety results, the safety profile of upadacitinib was generally similar to that reported in previous trials involving patients with rheumatoid arthritis. But direct comparison of the adverse events between trials for these two diseases cannot be made. And serious infection were more frequent with 30 milligram dose of upadacitinib than the other. And the incidence of herpes zoster were similar and were approximately 1% in both doses of upadacitinib and also with placebo. And there was a dose-dependent elevation of CPK, LDL, and HDL levels reported with upadacitinib. And grade 3 increase in AST or ALT levels were reported in only in about 2% or less of the patients across all groups. And there were no major cardiovascular events reported with upadacitinib. And there was 1 pulmonary embolism case occurred with 30 milligram upadacitinib dose. And owing to the 24-week short duration of the placebo-controlled portion of the trial, limited safety conclusions can be made for the events that could emerge in the long-term use. So I think we have answered these 3 questions as well. And so we'll move on to how precise was the estimate of treatment effect. So for that, we have to answer the questions, what are the confidence limit and were they statistically significant? So according to the study protocol, a sample size of 1,640 patients was planned to provide at least 90% power to detect a difference between upadacitinib and placebo for the primary endpoint achievement and most of the secondary endpoint achievement, and at least 85% power for evaluating the non-inferiority and superiority of each dose of upadacitinib as compared to adalimumab with respect to the primary efficacy endpoint at week 12. So as the study actually included 1,705 patients and it's higher than the 1,640 value, so we can conclude that it was adequately powered. And 95% confidence interval was used for all the primary and secondary efficacy endpoint analysis, which is the commonly used confidence interval in most of the trials. And so because of all these, we can conclude that the study was adequately powered. And the there was a precise estimation of the results. So I think with that, we have answered part B of the appraisal tool. What are the results that we have answered? And we'll move on to part C. Will the results help locally? So to answer that question, there are 3 sub-questions. Can the results be applied to the local population or in your context? And were all the clinically important outcomes considered? And are the benefits worth the harms and costs? So can the results be applied locally? So according to this chart, you all can see that more than 90% of the study population comprised of white people. And psoriatic arthritis is a disease with great heterogeneity and the clinical characteristics vary between different ethnic groups, and therefore the clinical response to various treatment modalities would eventually be different. So therefore, the applicability in our setting would be questionable. More trials are needed with greater number of participants from Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, to clarify this doubt. And you all know that tofacitinib is the only JAK inhibitor currently available in Sri Lanka that is also only in the private sector at the moment. So we need to gather more experience on using JAK inhibitors in our context before going into more specific non-selective JAK inhibitors. So can the results be applied locally is a question. And so the next question, were all clinically important outcomes considered? So although the study protocol stated that the response of axial spondyloarthritis to treatment would be assessed at pre-specified intervals using BASDAI and ASDAS scores as additional secondary variables, those data were not analyzed or published in this 24-week analysis. We all know that JAK inhibitors have shown to be efficacious in axial spondyloarthritis in some of the phase 2 trials done on ankylosing spondylitis patients, TORTUGA trial for filgotinib and SELECT-AXIS-1 for upadacitinib. So in our context, like most of the patients with psoriatic arthritis do fairly well with either MTX alone or MTX in combination with other conventional synthetic DMARDs when it comes to peripheral arthritis or skin disease. But the need for treatment escalation to a biologic or a targeted synthetic DMARD would mostly be due to poor response of axial symptoms. So therefore, if that data was presented and analyzed, it would have provided useful information for us, especially in our context, because we know that psoriatic arthritis has a significant proportion of patients with axial as well as peripheral arthritis. And the other thing I would like to highlight is if non-responders to adalimumab had been offered upadacitinib and vice versa for the non-responders to upadacitinib, at least in period 2 of the study, it would have provided useful information regarding the place for JAK inhibitors in TNF inhibitor non-responder populations. But this had been addressed in SELECT-PsA2 trial, so the results are available. So with that, I think we have answered the question, were all the clinically important outcomes considered, and my answer to that question would be up to some extent. So are the benefits worth the harms and costs? The trial has shown significant efficacy of the study drug with regard to various aspects of psoriatic arthritis and offers hope to patients who are not responding to or intolerant to or not accepting TNF inhibitors. And there were no significant harmful effects noted in this limited 24-week analysis of the trial, but long-term effects of the drug need to be evaluated in with future long-term extension of the trial. So are the benefits worth the harms and costs? Well, it needs further evaluation. So with that, I think we have answered all 3 questions. And so in the future, more longer duration and large-scale trials are required to determine the effectiveness and the risks of upadacitinib and its effectiveness in comparison to other biological DMARDs, as well as other approved non-selective JAK inhibitors used to treat psoriatic arthritis.